sense consciousness and the last death consciousness of the Arahat arises simultaneously with each consciousness. Materiality produced by Kama also arises simultaneously with the mental aggregates at the moment of conception. These last for 17 thought moments or 51 phases and then cease simultaneously with some kind of consciousness. The two intimations produced by mind also arise and cease together with consciousness. Because the four mental aggregates and materiality arise and cease together as shown above, it is questionable whether they are associated or dissociated. To clear up all doubts on this matter, the Buddha expounded it here and also in the dissociation condition of the patthana. In the latter, the context is, materiality is related to mentality by way of dissociation condition. Mentality is related to materiality by way of dissociation condition. Nibbana is said to be mentality because the subjective consciousness and mental factors realize and incline towards it as object. Consciousness and mental factors are also mentality. Since Nibbana and consciousness together with the mental factors are both mentality, it would appear that they are associated. But the Buddha has expounded here that they are dissociated and not associated. Sometimes dissociated, with regard to the four mental aggregates. If feeling and the other three, perception and the other three, mental formation and the other three, consciousness and the other three comply with the four characteristics of association, they are associated. Otherwise they are dissociated. Neither associated nor dissociated. Materiality and Nibbana. Materiality and materiality, feeling and feeling, perception and perception, mental formation and mental formation, consciousness and consciousness, contact and contact, volition and volition, etc. These pairs never comply with the four characteristics of association. So they are neither associated nor dissociated. Just as it cannot be said that one is like or unlike oneself, but only that one is like or unlike another, so also it cannot be said that earth is associated with or dissociated from earth, or feeling is associated with or dissociated from feeling. Therefore, they are neither associated nor dissociated. Exceptions. When it is said that mental formation and mental formation are neither associated nor dissociated, it means that with the 50 states of mental formation aggregate, contact and contact, volition and volition and so on are neither associated nor dissociated. But contact and volition, contact and wisdom and such pairs of different states of mental formation aggregate are associated. Similarly, when it is said that consciousness and consciousness are neither associated nor dissociated, this is meant in the case of I consciousness and I consciousness and so on for like pairs. But the I consciousness and the remaining 6 consciousness are dissociated. 4 kinds of dissociation. Dissociation by planes. This is the difference between the sensuous, fine material, immaterial and supramundane planes. Dissociation by classes. This is the difference between wholesome, unwholesome, resultant, inoperative, root-conditioned and non-root-conditioned classes of consciousness. The wholesome and unwholesome consciousness differ in class and, therefore, they are said to be dissociated by classes. Dissociation by times. This is the difference between the past, future and present. Although the wholesome consciousness of the past is the same as that of the future and the present, they differ in time and, therefore, they are said to be dissociated by times. Dissociation by continuity. This is the difference between that which arises in oneself and another or internally and externally. Although the wholesome consciousness which arises in oneself is the same as that in another, they differ in continuity and therefore, they are said to be dissociated by continuity. Note: The dissociation of I consciousness element from the remaining 6 consciousness elements comes under the dissociation by times. States of inquiry. A total of 250 states, 92 of which belong to internal and 158 to the external states of inquiry, form the subject matter of this chapter. The chart. There are 4 main columns, 2 for association, i.e. associated and partially associated, and 2 for dissociation, i.e. dissociated and partially dissociated. With regard to partial association, when materiality is the subject of inquiry, there is nothing to insert in this column, but in the case of mentality, all the associated mental factors are indicated in this column. With regard to partial dissociation, when materiality is the subject of inquiry, the 52 mental factors that are dissociated are indicated in this column, but in the case of mentality, the 16 subtle physical states and nibbana, which are dissociated, are indicated in this column. The form of question and answer this is similar to Chapter 1. Here direct questions are asked about the numbers of aggregates, bases and elements which are associated with and dissociated from each state of inquiry. Association. When either materiality or nibbana is dealt with, there are no associated states, and the answer invariably is, with none. Whenever this is the answer, there is no partial association. Dissociation. But materiality is dissociated from mentality as stated above, and TBE answer is, from 4 aggregates, from 1 base and from 7 elements. This is obtained by classification of the 4 mental aggregates under aggregates, bases and elements. This is total dissociation. Partial dissociation. When only part of mentati that comes under cognizable base and under cognizable element are dissociated, it is known as partial dissociation. This can be clearly understood from the example. At first it must be remembered that 16 subtle physical states, 52 mental factors and nibbana are the total number of states that come under cognizable base and under cognizable element. Now it has been shown that materiality and nibbana are neither associated nor dissociated. Therefore, with regard to matter aggregate, the association with or dissociation from the 16 subtle physical states and nibbana of the cognizable base and cognizable element need not be considered. This leaves only the 52 mental factors of the cognizable base and cognizable element for consideration. Now matter aggregate is dissociated from 52 mental factors since they are mentality. But as the latter forms only a part of cognizable base and cognizable element, matter aggregate is dissociated from a part of cognizable base and cognizable element. Thus, the answer here is partially dissociated from 1 base and from 1 element. With feeling, perception or mental formation, each of which is mentality, they are mutually associated, i.e. each is associated with the remaining 3 aggregates, with 1 base and with 7 elements. Moreover, since each of them is also associated with the 52 mental factors that form part of cognizable base and cognizable element, they are partially associated with 1 base and with 1 element. However, when feeling is dealt with, since feeling is not associated with feeling, it is excluded from the 52 mental factors and only 51 mental factors are partially associated. Similarly with perception, the perception from the 52 mental factors is excluded. Dissociation. Mentality and materiality are dissociated. So feeling, perception or mental formation is dissociated from 1 aggregate, from 10 bases and from 10 elements. Each of them is also dissociated from the 16 subtle physical states and nibbana that form part of cognizable base and cognizable element, and is therefore partially dissociated from one base and from one element. Association. With consciousness aggregate, this is associated with the remaining 3 mental aggregates. It is not associated with mind base and with 7 consciousness elements because these come under consciousness and consciousness is not associated with consciousness. But it is also associated with the same 3 mental factors aggregate, i.e., the 52 mental factors, under cognizable base and under cognizable element. Thus it is partially associated with one base and with one element. Dissociation. It is similarly dissociated as feeling aggregate since both are mentality. Association. With I consciousness, which is one kind of consciousness, this is similarly associated as consciousness aggregate. But it is associated only with the 7 primary mental factors and is therefore partially associated with the cognizable base and cognizable element. Dissociation. Since it is mentality, it is dissociated from one aggregate and from 10 bases. As regards dissociation from the elements, since I consciousness is neither associated nor dissociated with I consciousness, it is excluded from the 7 consciousness elements in dissociation. It is also dissociated from cognizable element as the latter comes under partial dissociation. It must be noted that whenever mentality is the subject of inquiry, the 16 subtle physical states and nibbana are always included in the partially dissociated states. Association. Origin truth is a part of the mental formation aggregate and, therefore, it is associated with the remaining 3 aggregates, with one base and with one element and also with the remaining 21 states of mental formation aggregate. In the latter case it is partially associated with the mental formation aggregate. Dissociation. Origin truth is associated with mind consciousness element which must, therefore, be excluded from the 7 consciousness elements in dissociation. It is also dissociated from cognizable element as the latter comes under partial dissociation. The rest is clear from the chart. Bodily pleasure faculty is feeling and is, therefore, associated with the aggregates and bases in the same way as feeling aggregate. But since it is pleasurable feeling accompanied with body consciousness, it is associated only with one element. In partial association, it is associated with the 6 primary mental factors, feeling being excluded. In dissociation, body consciousness element is excluded from the elements. The rest is clear from the chart. Association. Indifference faculty is associated with 55 types of consciousness accompanied by indifferent feeling and not with body consciousness which is, therefore, excluded. Moreover, since it is associated with 46 mental factors, i.e., excluding feeling, rapture, hate, envy, stinginess and worry from the 52 mental factors, it is partially associated. Dissociation. Here body consciousness, which is not associated, is included. The rest is clear from the chart. Conditioned by 6 bases. Contact is a part of the mental formation aggregate which is associated with the 89 types of consciousness. Thus it is associated with the mental formation aggregate in partial association. The dissociation is the same as the mental aggregates.